Good afternoon, Richard Miller from Melbourne, and I'm almost on my way out of here. Just spent a couple of weeks at an ashram, and it's Sunday, and I wanted to have another day with Sailor Bob Adamson. And who do you think I found? John Wheeler. Hello, John Wheeler.
Hello.
So, pleased to see you.
Good to see you again, yeah. We met a few years back, and here we are, halfway around the world. Yeah.
Somehow I think about confusion, because in a way I listen to people's questions, even when I don't have them, or when I can agree with them, or when I don't agree with them. And somehow the questions seem to have a repeating cycle that seems like if it was a good answer, they wouldn't be there anymore. And so for some people, the answer seems to work. And for other people, the answer seems to take them on another trail. And we talk about pointing, and don't eat the pointer, right? Just follow it and drop it.
Well, I think if you look at on an individual basis, like in my case, or I don't know, perhaps your case, other people, I mean, if you take a particular person and their pursuit of this, it doesn't necessarily look that way. I mean, if the pointers are resonating and if we are getting to the essence of it, I think what I found, what I see a lot with people, is that the questions are diminishing and they're getting fewer and fewer and fewer, to the point where there's just a simplicity of reality where the questions are resolved. Now, if we go to a meeting and start, talking with a fresh group of people, we'll see kind of the questions. But, of course we're going to see questions, and the same basic types of repetitive questions in a setting like that. But in my case, and in general, in talking with people, I do see that if this is approached and if we are getting to the essence of it, it's not that way, actually. That people do maneuver out of the question.
Right?
Yeah, I think the proper, or not proper, but it's like if this is really resonating in the intent that it is meant to, that there isn't a very palpable sense of moving through the questionings, because they are getting to they're getting addressed at the root. Now, if they're not getting addressed at the root, then we're not going to see that. The questions will go on and on and on and on. So that, I think it is important to understand, or at least be open to the idea that the questions are coming from a basic root or a basic way of understanding who we are. So if that is addressed very, accurately and clearly, then we will get to the root cause. If it's not, then we're not getting to the cause, and we're not going to be able. I think that you would see in that case the questions would go on and on and on, the same basic questions. Now, if you've been pursuing something spiritually, having dialogues, reading and all that, and then you find as the years go by that all the same basic questions are actually still there, as vital and as they were before, then to me that's just a sign that we have yet to get to the root of it.
So a lot of the structure of the study comes from traditions and spiritual writings, and so then those similar questions are probably born in those spiritual writings. Somehow there's, it's a book, so it's not really a face-to-face contact where you don't necessarily feel it. I mean, you can feel a book also.
Yeah.
I mean, but in some sense, there can be no adjustments. The book has to be, in a way, written for everybody, and then you just have to work it out, right? Whereas somebody face-to-face with you can just kind of get the feel of you and just answer something that would be maybe totally different than what they would write in a book.
Yeah, I mean, the book is, my feeling on books, having read a lot of books and studied and looked at things over the years in seeking, that trying to get to the bottom of this through books and through understanding and reading at that level, it wasn't particularly effective. Now, it gives you a kind of a broad idea of roughly what we're talking about, but the actual, implementation for us individually for our set of questions, like we may come to the table at some point where we have our basic set of doubts and questions. And the name of the game there is we're looking at those and addressing those and getting to the root of those. That activity is not going to be happening in any book, because they're your questions and they're the ones that are up for you, and they mean something for you. So you can be kind of just reading all these books and gathering all this information, and in some way you find that many of the basic questions are not getting addressed, or sometimes they may be really brilliant questions and answered very well, but they're not your questions. It's because a book is really, a lot of books are like recordings of dialogues or whatever, and those are basically snapshots of somebody else's process, Somebody's sitting with a certain teacher and somebody wrote that down, but that's not you sitting there. So it's kind of like a secondary representation of somebody else. So there's a kind of an inbuilt, often there's an inbuilt limitation about just simply trying to read books and understand this. My feeling over the years is it wasn't, it had its purpose, but it was very limited. Otherwise, we'd all just pick up the book.
And we'd get
and everybody say, "Oh, that's this is what it is." But
that's great.
We find it's like it doesn't seem to work that way. There's a point where we have to kind of come face to face with our own. What is my direct experience? What are my questions? And there's going to be something in that that's a little mysterious, kind of not fully known to ourselves. Because if it was so clear and we could see the root so clearly, we wouldn't be having the question. So there's kind of something in that of maybe missing something or not quite seeing something. And often I feel that can come out more effectively in a dialogue with someone.
Yeah. When you say get to the root, see, like you're saying, like what is really the cause, or like the root of asking a question like this, and it's kind of like the idea that I got to get somewhere. It's almost like it's our basic makeup that we're somehow deprived in this place, right? And we got to get, and tomorrow we could fix that. And so then that's really the root. It's not like I don't hear you saying that you're going to resolve any of my problems. They're going to resolve by themselves, or I'm going to resolve them step by step, or I'm going to walk away from them, or I'm going to take a whole new look at my life. But in the meantime, getting to the root more or less means like, do you really have to resolve anything? What's that questioning mechanism more than what's the answer to that question?
That's right, yeah. So like I would say, like the question is just an expression of some assumption or view that is, the question is just kind of expressive of that basic experience below the question. Now, if we just tackle the question, even if we give a kind of a reasonably good answer, or you read in a book and somebody gives an answer, I'd be more interested to make sure that we've kind of brought forward what's at the root of the question, and looked at it at that level. Because answering questions is, because the mind, you can always think up another question, but what is driving the arising of that question? What is it that I'm really trying to find out by the particular question? So it's like kind of getting to a deeper level beneath the question, and then having a look at that. That's when it starts to get very, very interesting, because the more you penetrate below the question, it's like you could have 1,000 different questions, but you go to the next level and there's only a kind of a handful of basic issues underneath the questions, and then a little bit more looking, you can see that underneath those there's even a more basic. And then you kind of get this feeling that the way that I often look at this is that at the end of the day, what's driving all the questions is I don't know who I am.
In one way, a question, in order to ask it, in order to answer, we have to put our attention on it. So in one way, a question is actually a way to leave this space with my attention, leave here and now, and go into an abstract, we could call it a concept, but just an abstract construction. And so in a way, a question is an escape. It's an escape from feeling, because feeling is always here and now. Feeling isn't in my thought. I can have a feeling here and now because of a thought, but it's here and now, right? So then, in a way, a question and an answer are ways to get out of here.
Yeah. I mean, one way to see that is the basic insight is that at the end of the day, any question is actually just an idea. And it's another way in which the attention is simply going to an idea again. Nothing wrong with ideas, and there's nothing wrong with going to them, but the way that I look at that is even going to a kind of a looking at what's going on, and even that motion like that. And what I find that is the kind of the catch in that is if we are seeking who we are in the idea.
In the answer.
Yeah, no, there's a question that we think that the content of the question, I really got to figure this out. What's happening is that the question is an idea. And there's an energy going to the thought because there's a subtle seeking of who I am as if it's going to be found at the mental level. And so that keeps the mechanism
It's
driving.
a belief in the answer. It's a belief in the answer, and it's a belief in our process of making things better, of interacting with our lives and planning it out. And somehow there is a space between those two questions when we're trying to think of the next question or formulate it, but we totally gloss over that and discount that and just say, well, that was the nothing place where I was getting my question ready.
Yeah, so if we are, what I was saying before, I think that when you look deeply into this kind of who am I and what is my reality and what is my nature, to me, that's kind of the deep underlying thing. Now, if I'm turning to the mind in hopes that I'm going to find the answer to that by the mind giving me a concept, eventually we're going to kind of step back and just simply explore the reality of that. Is that really fruitful? Is it really possible to know who I am? Because, what we'll see, another, insight as you start to look at this is that the mind is just presenting these concepts, these images that are functional, they're words and images and all that. And then there's really what I naturally am that we start to notice is actually prior to that activity. And you start to realize something that we may have missed, and that is who I am is here preceding the question, preceding the thought. And, I've been looking for that in the mind. And if you see that, there's a kind of almost like grasping the whole totality of what's been hanging us up at kind of one big, bird's eye view. It's like, I've been looking for my identity in thought, as if the concept was going to be able to tell me who I am. And one of the things that you find in this way of looking at things is that who you are is not going to be found at a conceptual level.
Yeah.
That's all you need to see, because if you can really see that and really see the simplicity of that, why that's not true. Why it's not true? Because you're not a concept.
Right.
I'm not talking to a concept. I'm talking to a existing, aware,
life,
conscious
yeah.
life itself.
Life,
and so, why would I find my identity in a thought? And then that whole energy around the questioning and the seeking of the mind just can relax down. Now, when that does, I'm here right now without the thought or the question or the idea. And we can just simply notice and explore and feel and experience what is that state of my being without the concept. That's where the whole structure gets completely undermined. Mm-hmm. And we're not even, to answer that question, to know what I am, which is that metaphysical basic question, is going to be accessible just by direct insight, direct feeling and experience right here and now, by simply, noticing and feeling into what is my nature. I'm not going to go out to the thought to do that.
So I think that we can readily see, and maybe a lot of people will agree that they've got to a point where they see that society, family, and the imagined individual are all in a way verbal constructions and made up of different thought patterns and different agreements and different belief patterns, which are verbal constructions. And in a way, we built the world on words, mm-hmm. and we build our society on words, and we're building ourselves on words. And so then that's just how we put it together and how we behave, and we call it the collective. So we don't even necessarily own it, because we inherited from our attitudes from our mom and dad, and they inherited their attitudes from their mom and dad and our great-grandparents and blah, 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 until we're just in this web of words, mm-hmm. that, it's somehow seems to be all of life, or all that we value, or all that we feel that we can work with. Mm-hmm. And then where there's no words, we just think, nothing's happening there, right?
Yeah.
But really, it is still happening, because the subtle part is still happening, the life is still happening, and people say breathing, heart beating, all those things, digesting are happening, and then who knows, everything's happening there too.
Yeah, and it's those words and structures and language and society and all, it has its own meaning and value. Because how could you function and behave in the world without those kinds of
It's
ways?
a game we're definitely playing, right?
Yeah, but and there's
sometimes
nothing.
It's pretty vicious.
So, but what I would just could point out is that at its own level, those structures and tools are very useful and necessary, and there's nothing wrong with them. But the catch of it really is if I'm looking for what I am in those structures, that's the catch.
You're not going to find it.
The concepts are not a problem as concepts. It's the way we're kind of searching for something in them that you're going to find is not available in those. I can't really go to a thought to tell me who I am when my natural state is here proceeding with the thought. It's a very simple kind of mechanical basic observation. So when I realize that my true being or the fullness of what I am is not going to be provided to me through at a conceptual level, then that identity, searching for identity in those structures relaxes off of that. Now, I can still go back and use those.
Yeah.
But to be what I am and to know what I am, I don't need to use those, and I know that now, and it simplifies this whole thing immensely.
Well, you can even use them better, can't you? Because now you're not hung up in believing that they're going to get you, you know? Then
Yeah.
you could say, well, I can work with them, you know? Because
Exactly,
like
yeah.
society, you still want to get a promotion if you want to get one, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes people say, no, I don't involve myself with peace on earth or anything like that because I'm not a do-gooder, because I'm not trying to save the world,
Yeah.
because the world's in the greater hands, because I'm not the doer, because I'm, you know, all these reasons, spiritual reasons, which cause, in a way, disengagement. And then whatever happens, you know, mischief happens because we've created a space
Well,
for
and
it.
what you see, though, is that it's subtly going back into the mind. The mind is continuing to provide conceptual definitions of who you are. I'm a spiritual person doesn't do this, I don't like this. But you realize, if you've seen this holistically, you realize even those statements are just more of that same mechanism of trying to define myself in a concept. You know, your being, your natural state here is not a seeker or do-gooder, or it's not in the world, it's not out of the world. I mean, every one of those statements is just a way of the mind kind of crystallizing a concept. So none of those is adequate to what you are, and each and every one of those, if it's approached trying to define who we are, there will be a feeling of limiting, like a feeling of something is kind of pinching. Although if there's a relaxation off that, there's an immediate spacious openness, and in that spacious openness of who we truly are, that's not a seeker. It's not a problematic self. There's no notion of like, I'm in the world or out of the world. It doesn't even enter the picture, really.
That's such a beautiful point in there, because you said, like, if you're relying on these in the world, out of the world, or any idea, you're going to feel kind of a pinching, you called it. So
Yeah.
then that's really that's real presence. You just feel it. Like that's what they're saying when they say follow the energy or something. You can just feel the opening.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to share too, because I think with any kind of a teaching, you can see whether that's kind of like making more and more distinctions and more systems and more things that you got to sort through, or less and less. Mm-hmm. Somehow when it's making less and less, it feels like the pinching goes down.
I've thought about that a lot. I've looked at that because, you know, a question that could arise about, well, you know, why is that suffering? I mean, what is it that pinches? What's actually going on there? So the mind says, you know, you're this, and it's just an idea, and I guess it's, you know, and somehow there's something in that suddenly it feels like it pinches. And what I've seen with that is that, you know, prior to the concept, it's kind of wide open, spacious, undefined. It's kind of just, it's not limited. It's kind of, there's no particular boundary on what presence is or what existence is. Now, every concept becomes a defined, kind of bounded image.
Kind of a box, huh?
A little box. Now, if I see it as a box and it's just used as a box, there's no pinch. But if I overlook the natural state of being that I am and I try to almost like shrink that down as if it was equated with that box, that's the pinch. So to take the spacious presence and try to funnel it down to something that's very narrow, you can kind of viscerally start to feel why that would feel uncomfortable. If I tried to put shoes on that were many sizes too small, my foot would be hurting.
Yeah.
So if I try to fit my natural state down to the level of a concept, it's not going to feel free. And that concept can be even a spiritual concept.
Right.
Any kind of concept.
Maybe that's total grace. That's the real grace. The grace that says that, I can feel a pinch and feel constriction and feel hurt when I'm limiting myself. And if I didn't have that feeling, I would probably be in all kinds of little boxes. I'd be a really contortionist, right? Because I wouldn't have any feedback loop to say, hey, spread out, open up, you're big.
Yeah, exactly. So, our own experience is showing us what we need to see or how it works. Basically, and then if we're at all curious, or we have these dialogues and we're curious and we're examining what's going on, then all of the way that it works and how the limit is constructing is all being presented to us in our direct experience every moment. Because here we are without the thought, and that there's the total freedom everybody's looking for is right here, right now. It's totally here. In these pointers that people talk about being, it's here. Awareness is here. Spaciousness is here. Natural state is here for you and for me. It's completely, the whole thing is completely in evidence. And there's that pause, that kind of without the box, without the thought.
Yeah, the box is always a thought structure,
Yeah,
right?
now if that's like getting that taste of the natural state, not as a spiritual concept or reading in a book, but we are in the immediacy of the living reality, actually knowing what we're talking about, actually experiencing this natural, awake, open being that is, there's nothing deniable about it, it's nothing theoretical. And it's nice to just like tap right into that. Here we are. Like what we've been reading and searching for all these years, it's like suddenly, it's like here we are. Now, that gap that comes in there suddenly allows a little bit of an opening, because if a concept suddenly appears, it's so clearly a bounded box. And even if there is a little bit of a pinch, we're seeing it now from knowing the spacious place, prior to the pinch. And that is a total grace, a total revelation, because, there is the demonstration of how suffering arises. And now that we kind of have that way of looking at it, we can see, God, is that true? Does that make any sense? Am I really limited to this idea? Or am I the spaciousness? And the answer is so clear, because you were there even just before that thought appeared. So we get very familiar with how the mind works and how the suffering arises, and the direct recognition of our natural state. And that is essentially all that we need to see. Because if you get familiar with this, you start to realize the availability of this. You're going to start to see very amazing things, like you've never left this. You can't, there's nothing you can do to switch it off.
There's, I'd say, okay, like maybe there's a time before we really get used to feeling that pinch and the immediacy of it. And we think, pinches come and go, of course.
Yeah.
But it's hard to correlate them and to say that I've limited myself and that's what caused it. And so then, okay, before we figure the pinch, or when we feel the pinch too, and when we're pretty much onto it, but somehow there's still some structure there that says I can improve something. And then there's so many images. I see, in my life, I see so many images. I could do this, could go there, could do this. And there's a belief that some of those images are so good, it's a temptation, that I got to make something out of that one. And then you pull that down and start to construct a story out of it, and then you're gone. You're limited in the story box. And what is that temptation that
in the past,
can we notice that temptation just as it's coming up?
Well, I think what happens
is we have to notice it in hindsight.
Yeah, I think what happens is once you get things pointed out, what's what in the basic discussion that we're having, and that there's that clear appreciation of what we truly are, then it's like that mechanism. It's kind of it can't sustain, because it's too kind of sweet and simple and clear outside the box. So like even if the mind, an old idea or an old pattern or seeking who I am, even if that did come up, the oldness of it, the pinch of it, the kind of it's just not that working would be. It's so clear and obvious that it's kind of like even our own innate intelligence can't really go there
forever. Huh?
So the main thing is that now if we don't understand who we are, we don't understand the simplicity of what we're pointing to in terms of what your true state is, then we are still continuing to hope that we can find that in the structure.
Yeah, we're believing that someone said that that's where you're going to find it. So if you're not finding it, try harder.
Yeah, or if you do run out of steam on a particular concept, then you will switch off and maybe, oh, now there's a new concept, a new teaching, a new this, a new that, whatever. Yeah. But that, eventually we start to, that's when you more like step back and get this holistic view. You start to wonder, well, what's the whole mechanism here? You know, I've tried this concept, this teaching, that goal, this guru, this book, this system, and you've given it the old college try, and something is dawning on you that nothing is quite delivering. Now, and maybe you'll stumble across something where, yeah, but did you see who you are? Did you see where you're actually standing? And there's a recognition of that. And you can't deny that when it's pointed to a simple clarity and an ease and something very kind of clear about it, that we can never lose that. We can never kind of pretend that's not there or whatever. Now, and that's, I think, the difference, is because even if a limiting concept comes up, it just doesn't have the steam.
Yeah, you really gave some trust there, you know, because you said once you've seen it or something, you know, whatever, you said that kind of thing, even that temptation can't sustain. And you've given us trust to say, like, it's not, I'm back in the temptation, I'm more anxious than ever, you know, because I have even seen it already, and now I'm back there again. You just said it can't sustain, right? Yeah. Because it's just going to peter out, it'll fizzle, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why you have to see, like I was saying, what has been the root driver of us ever from the beginning, actually searching for identity in any concept, was I didn't know who I was. I didn't know the nature of my being. I never had noticed the true experience. And so there was something propelling me to try to answer that. Now, once we see where we stand, the basic reason for the whole search in that way has been exposed. And we can never go back to that same level of ignorance or kind of blindness around it. You will never be able to go back. And all you're dealing with at that point is, if something, an old structure, an old attempt to find in the mind, if that does appear, the beauty of it is actually, and even if there is a belief in it, or there's energy going to it, you got the immediate sense of the limit or the constriction that automatically doesn't feel natural. So you got that lesson, or life is pointing out right away to you, this isn't it, this isn't who you are, this isn't natural. So that's good, that's hardwired into this thing. So that's why I'm a big believer in this kind of getting to the core, because if we get to the core to see what's what, then life itself and these appearances, they naturally reveal to us what we need to see moment by moment. You know, so, there was a thought, you're this, you should do that, and then a little bit of belief goes into that. Oh, wow, doesn't feel that great. What's going on? Oh, that's just an idea. What am I again? Oh. Okay. And there you are.
Okay, here's one. Maybe here's a slant on it that might be helpful. I don't know. See what you think. Because we say that the root is that you don't know who you are, right? But we could just depersonalize it and saying we're the collective. It's like we're the collective. We don't know who we are. You know, it doesn't know who it is, and really, it's not like there's no blame in it or there's no deficiency in it. It's just like it's our challenge.
It's not personal, yeah.
It's our challenge to say, hey, I can bring up the collective by investigating this thing. It's not even an achievement. It's just a curiosity and a play and an interest and it's about time finally, and knowing that your whole family and your whole city and your whole country and everybody is just rooting for you, you know. Come on, somebody's got to know this, you know. You can do it.
Well, think about it, though, you know, that it is a good point, because if the notion that I'm seeking to know who I am turns out to be one of the ideas.
Yeah,
and what's
I'm seeking to know who I am.
But that's just kind of a way of talking about it. In truth, in what we're pointing to, which is our natural state here, that's prior to any definition, that's not a Richard or a John or any individual. That's just the fabric of reality, just kind of shining. It's not personal. It's not individualistic. And it's not like you as Richard or me as John we are on the treadmill kind of, and we are going to arrive there, because that's too much in the conceptual structures.
Yeah, that's just another one, a concept like I. Like I'm going to find out who I am, or we are going to find out who we are. But
yeah, so, if we were to take the label Richard or John out of the concepts just for the sake of looking right now, and just be in the immediacy of what is here, there's just a direct insight, a direct knowing of that, and there's nothing personal about it.
Just take the pressure off is what I'm saying.
It's not about me recognizing it or you recognizing it.
Yeah, it's not about achievement.
But you could say, perhaps, as in a way of language, is that own natural state, seeing itself, a recognition of itself, because, or whatever it is, but that's just, for us now in seeing this together. Now we're just twisting
and turning, right?
Because we are here right now in the total freedom, you and I. And what I found, and my approach to this, my understanding is, this freedom and this openness of whatever we're pointing to here, that really is what it is. It's not something beyond that. And it doesn't even, these spiritual things that we hear, like, let's say, awakening, is redundant to what we're seeing together, because what's here right now is this awake, aware presence. So instead of it being like some kind of conceptual attainment, it's actually in the immediacy of the full awakeness, the full aware reality is actually shining here, as part of the fabric of existence. And we were thinking in the mind of someday if I get awakened, something will happen for me, but that's in the structure. But here we are right now as the non-conceptual awareness, and it's like, well, isn't that what they were saying all along, that reality is the non-conceptual awareness? And you and I right now are, for lack of a better word, simply abiding as that, not as entities, but just because that is what's here right now. And, it's something very, very important to realize, is that that's what this is. And here we are. And it's just a kind of a noticing and appreciating that, what we've been after through the concepts turns out to be here. And then in noticing that this is not going to go anywhere. So we get up after this interview and go walk off somewhere and do whatever, and this is still going to be as present there as it is right now. And in all of our experiences and thoughts and all that, you will notice something which is kind of stunning in a way, that this is unconditioned and constant. I mean, it's really not anything that depends on anything happening or coming and going. It's not even personal. It's like we've been swimming around in the sea of aware, awake presence every second the whole time. And it's almost like the availability of it was almost so simple in a way that it's like we kind of just overshot it.
Yeah, right.
But aren't you awake and aware and existent right now, naturally, effortlessly now?
See, effortlessly is like a really key word, because we've got this so laced up with effort that this is going to be hard, that we're going to have to apply ourselves, that this is going to take time. And I don't even know what effort is. I mean, what would be effort then?
Yeah. Well, again, in the idea, if there's the idea that there's some marvelous state that's not present and there's me, then somehow you feel like I'm going to get it through effort or maintain it, or it will arrive. But when you actually kind of challenge that a little bit to come back to what's really present, you realize it's not over there and I'm not over here, and what the natural being is here is actually on our own experience right now. It is not an effort. Like you're not making an effort to be. It's actually given automatically, like right. Almost like a pure grace, because nobody's even doing anything.
Right.
And all of those qualities that are often pointed to as what is real are here now, if we actually just cared to simply, if we talk of the awareness, the spaciousness, and all that.
So is effort just an anxiety level? When things feel strained, then we call that effort? In other words, if we're tense and we move, any movement is hard work, because all the muscles are tensed up, right? So an anxiety is kind of like a contraction, and moving through a contraction is an effort.
Yeah, I mean, our bodies right now, are also moving and functioning, and there's kind of a rhythm, a harmony to it. It might not even be we're not bringing in a kind of individuality like I'm doing this and I'm raising my hand. I mean, there's a natural flow to the action, like to the activity. It's not so much an effortful. I think the effort comes in more at a conceptual level when all the duality and all the, split between, like there's me and then there's this, and then if I do this, and it brings in this kind of tension into the mind. And, that tension, I guess we label that as this thing called effort that feels like, well, this must be what you do. This tension must be vital to reach.
Yeah, so we're habituated to the pinching, actually. That's part of the pinching, right?
Yeah.
And we're habituated to saying, when we pinch, the more we pinch, the more effective we are.
Well, because you get a lot of that encouragement in life to, you've really got to do something to reach something. If you really want something of value, you've really got to work at it. It's really, whatever like that. And that may be well and good at a certain level, but in terms of being what you are, and in terms of the direct insight to what is here, those models, those ways of looking at the problem, so-called, those don't really apply to how this works. So
that an effort, in a way, is like actually what's holding you away, right? Trying to make effort is actually turning your focus away from what's free and always here.
Yeah, they used to say something in a Zen quote, was something like, the moment you begin to seek enlightenment, you lose it. Kind of this idea.
Right.
I think we can see that now, because again, if they also said in those traditions, your own mind, your own essence is the reality. So, if my own true nature is the reality, which is the pointer, if I go seeking for it, in a way, it kind of moves me away from noticing the obvious.
Right.
And that's not going to bring me any closer to what's already present. And we eventually learn that lesson, because it simply doesn't work.
Let's say a little bit, because you said your own mind, and I think I heard Bob this morning say, show me a mind. There's no mind. It's just a bunch of thoughts around.
Yeah.
But what did you mean by mind when you said our own mind is kind of like reality?
That's just some pointer from a tradition. But the thing is, it's just saying that you're the essence of what you truly are, your true nature, and that spacious reality that they're pointing to, that's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You are that. And there's all these different ways, I think, that historically people have said that. And you are that and all that. Your own mind is the Buddha. Your own nature, your own true nature, all these things. But the thing is, again, that's not so important as the non-conceptual tuning in, kind of recognizing of what we're seeing together. But it could, so if we kind of appreciated this idea that the natural state of being, where the ease and the openness is here right now, which it is. So you can just feel like if the mind suddenly told me, when I get it, then I'm going to be there. You could, there's kind of a duality that arises in that. Especially if we'd miss the simplicity of the fact that it's already present. The mind would begin tensing up, kind of gripping.
Start to believe that and start to go on it, right?
Yeah, and then
be tempted by that thought.
The attention and the interest and the activity would start to focus in on that concept. Right. And it would bring in this kind of gripping feeling,
right,
that we would call effort. And we might even think that this is true, I need to do this. If I just do that even more.
Yeah, and then as we focus in on that, we're farther and farther away from what's already here.
Yeah, and the classic one is those Chinese finger cuffs.
Oh, yeah.
Like the more you pull, people have talked about that. There's a point where you realize if I just kind of relax, they simply fall away.
Right.
So if I grip and push and effort more and more and more and more on some concept, it just kind of dawns, because it's kind of common sense. It's not really working. I'm not really getting anywhere.
Right.
So you kind of allow this idea that maybe you could step off of that, and then here we are.
Unfortunately, we also have another learning that says never give up. If you give up, you're a sissy. So then you get to that point saying, is this really working? Never give up. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
Well, that's why I think you can't, the normal types of things that we learn in life on how to do things at a relative level, in terms of accomplishments and physical things and achievements and climbing Mount Everest and all those things, those kinds of attitudes don't necessarily apply to this self-understanding.
They don't translate.
They don't translate.
That's important to say, because nobody said that directly, I don't think.
Because if Mount Everest is up there and I'm, down here, then there's some kind of...
There's a process to get up there, right?
And it might be hard, I have to exert my legs, and there is a certain amount of effort.
You got to bring the oxygen, you got to do all the stuff.
Yeah, because you don't make an effort,
too, you're going to be a goner.
But if you try to translate that paradigm to recognizing who you are, or, recognizing that paradigm doesn't really help.
Doesn't aid.
It's actually a total distraction.
Right. It's actually total distraction.
And you got to, but these things that kind of sound, when we first hear them, like, you're not making an existence to be, you're not making an effort to be, or, the natural awareness is not something that you're constructing, it's already functioning, or those kinds of things, they start to show us that there's something else about this. This is like a kind of a reversal of what we assumed.
I want to talk about, kind of like a basic misunderstanding, in which I would just say you could phrase it just by saying, if you look at the appearance of the world, a very small percentage are involved or immerse themselves in this type of an inquiry. And then so many people say, well, they're not ready or something like that, or they're greedy, or all kinds of reasons, but I mean, I don't need a reason. I just want to make that statement that not many people, so then they misunderstand it, right? They misunderstand and think that there's something complex about it or something not practical about it, and they got to arrange their life first, and then maybe later they could think about these things. But I would say practicality is a big deterrent, because people somehow think that we're just have a leisure class here, that we're philosophizing or something, but we're not out there tooth and nail trying to make a living. So then, I mean, from that, I'm just saying, like, that's not necessarily the truth, because you're totally immersed in a normal life, right? With even certain constraints as a caregiver, certain constraints as an important position in an important company that's actually integrating with all kinds of areas in that one company, and somehow you're kind of like a pivot point or a smoothness to make it all work, and you're not on any peripheral place where you're just kind of peeping in once in a while, and you're in the full-on world.
Yeah, well, I think what you're getting at is what we're talking about, for me, has not required a lifestyle change. So the normal routine of life, working, taking care of family, and all the things that most people are doing in the world, that is not a bar or some kind of hindrance to what we're talking about. Because my life situation is such that that's all carried on the whole time, even while interested in this and having these things pointed out to me at one stage, still a working person, still a functioning, person in life and all that. But now there was a time in life where it seemed to me that the only way to see what we're talking about is you must pull away and go to a monastery and alter your life and do all these radical changes. I thought that, actually, and I did a lot of those things at one stage. But that turned out to be actually a bit of a misunderstanding.
Yeah. Did you do them for a while? Because then people will say, oh, that was a preparation, they'll make an excuse.
Well, I did them because I was suffering, and I was trying to do anything that I could do to, kind of get to the bottom of it. And I would hear people would say, well, if you do this, that'll be the answer. If you do this, if you learn Sanskrit, if you wear Indian clothes, if you go here, if you go there. So sign me up, I'll try anything, But over the years, at that phase, it eventually dawned on me that wasn't really, in and of itself, wasn't really getting to the root of what I felt I was really, we all just want that natural happiness and clarity of being at peace, basically. And that really wasn't forthcoming as a result of those activities. Now, my life situation was such that I needed to work and support family and have a career and go to school and all that. So I didn't really I needed to do that, so I just carried on with that. But the spiritual looking, and this was also something that was kind of going on just right along with that. And there's no conflict between that, it turns out.
Yeah.
Because this is actually fairly simple. Like, we can see what we need to see and understand these basic points completely irrespective of what, physically we're doing. And even when we do see these things and that clarity, that simplicity is there, we can still work and function and support and be productive citizens in the appearance of things. So I just that whole issue of the lifestyle and the pulling away from the world and trying to, as if that was something that was like vitally connected to this, in my experience, is simply untrue.
Well, there's two kind of people. There's a lot of people that are actually doing that, and they're putting themselves through lots of changes to try to get that natural happiness, and it's either working or not working. But then there's a whole raft of people that are not even entering into the field because they think they have to do that, and they say, no, for me, that's impossible. So I think there's two people that we're addressing here, and it's really, really important testimony that you're giving, that and even after trying it, you realize that it was, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing you or not, that it wasn't helpful. That actually there's no hindrance whatsoever in being in just a full-on life.
Yeah, well, the main thing is that what we really want to see is the simple truth of what is real and who we are. That's what it's about, And it turns out what I'm saying is that the particular lifestyle that was going on wasn't really the key issue. Because there are many people that are working and carrying on a normal life that do see this. I know many people that it's very clear to them. They aren't yogis, they aren't living in the Himalayas or whatever. So I just, as a seeker at one stage, your mind would make certain assumptions of it's really got to look like this. But that turns out to be one of those concepts.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really have to look like that. Now you could be doing those things and seeing this.
Yeah. So then those that found it through that will propound that kind of, say, oh yeah, when I went to the monastery, I did this, I joined that, I chanted this, I did prostrations or whatever. And they'll say that worked.
Well, they could, but but I would say, what I've realized is it wasn't the outer environment that was the cause. I mean, if you really see the simplicity of, here we are, and this is what it is, and it's kind of independent of what our bodies and minds are doing, then you realize that that's not what it's about. And then our bodies and minds are just carrying on in whatever way that they're functioning. But we're not linking in, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this, and because of all these outer things, that was how I arrived. And then you turn around and start telling people that they're supposed to do that, because that just kind of misses, in a sense, the essence of what we've been talking about. It's more like, in the way that I'm talking about, it's more of an understanding. It's more of an openness to see what's true in experience. It's really not so much an action-oriented thing, even though
action is there, right?
Yeah, and those actions for all of us are going to look different because we're all different and because of the situation that we find ourselves in. And I've done my share of all those spiritual activities, and I'm sure in their way, because, every pointer and every tradition, there is some underlying alignment with this. Who are you? What's real? Look at who you are. I mean, there's some flavor of that in every tradition, every path. And that was in the background, kind of. But when it really comes down to just that direct looking and really cutting it down to what we need to see, it's like right then and there, you're just in the living immediacy of the present reality and all that stuff about what we did and where we were and all that. It's not even entering into right now, it's like it just kind of shifts off of that level. And then you realize this kind of truth, which is, why we talk about this, and you have your website and there's something comes up to want to share and let people know, is that we can see this now. We as, normal functioning people who just have a heart motivation, like a yearning to basically kind of get to the bottom of things, all of us, no matter where we find ourselves, in family, out of family, spiritual, single, whatever, we all have access.
Even in the midst of a divorce or like
Absolutely.
bankruptcy or like a foreclosure? Or...
Absolutely. Because why? Because the reality of what we're talking about is still available, still sustains, is unconditional. And so again, that's not what is going to be causing or preventing us. It's really, I would say, which is a kind of a pointer, is that our heart's sincere longing to get to the root of things, that simple, sincere desire to know what's true, that is coming up independently of where these bodies and minds happen to be. And you see it all throughout history, you know. If that's there, then life kind of maneuvers us to a place where we hear a kind of a simple pointing that reminds us, we take a look, we see, and we realize, oh, this is what is, and look how simple it is, and, you know, I may have missed this. But what I'm trying to say is that that activity is kind of moving independently of what the bodies and minds are doing. Because many, you know, you can absolutely see this, understand this, recognize this, get to the root of it, absolutely no matter what you're doing in life. If you're on an assembly line, if you're an executive, if you're having a divorce, if you're a yogi, wherever you are, this message, this insight is totally, absolutely available for you. That's the beauty of it, actually, you know.
You talked about a natural happiness and a peace of mind and ease, you know, and then it would seem like you'd have to be more effective no matter what you were doing if you weren't wasting energy on a lot of friction and a lot of blockages and a lot of overcoming and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is that like, are you a healing at work? Like, I mean, does everyone have to come to your desk because you really were...
Well, the thing is, if the energy of living is not going into all of those, you know, kind of like whirlpools in the mind of self-centered thinking and problems and all that, there's just more life, energy, and more presence, and kind of there's more availability in the functioning that's there. And I mean, one would naturally, I think, assume that there's going to be a little bit more clarity and harmony and ease around it. Now, if that will attract somebody or they'll notice something, or, I mean, however that plays out, it's going to, you know, it will play out. But, I mean, basically, yes, because what drags people down in life is the energy getting all sucked up in all the personal self-centered problems. And what we're talking about easily kind of maneuvers us out of that zone. So there's the body, mind, life essence shining through, functioning in its, you know, situation that it finds itself in without all that kind of mental crap going on. Mm-hmm. So it's almost kind of like self-evident, you know, I mean, what that, you know, how that's going to, you know, play out. Now, there's no blueprint that says, okay, now it's going, you know, you're going to do this and you're going to do that, because it's just the flowing and manifesting of life is going to be arising out of that vehicle, out of that expression, in its own way. But can you imagine, you know, without the self-centered suffering, without all that obsession, what do you think that life will look like?
Yeah, I think it'll be more beautiful, you know, and more flowing, and there'll be a lot more yes to it, and there'll probably be a lot more new things coming into it, and it'll probably grow in ways that, because you'll say, like me, I never knew I could do any of this stuff, especially talk with somebody. I wasn't a very good talker. I'm not saying I'm a good one now, but... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you picked up all those skills and the things that needed to come as you got into that all just kind of came into the picture, and here you are now.
So, yeah, and I do it in a way kind of inviting people in and saying, and I don't really promote the site and all that as much as one would think it could be done, but, and people invite you to talk, and you come and speak, and, you know, maybe you don't necessarily tell people at work, do you want to play this game? I'm having a really good time. Or they might ask you, like, why you're so cool? You're always cool-headed. What's up with you?
Well, I'm just like you. I don't, even that need to share or talk about it, I mean, that's just it's not really what it's about, you know? Yeah. I mean, if it comes up, I mean, here we are talking, and, you know, probably neither one of us really planned this a few days ago.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought you were coming. This is my gig, really, so I was really probably planning, you know, or just I held a kind of an image to it. It could happen.
Yeah. But anyway, without the concept and the definition put on it, what is actually going on is that the life is expressing and functioning and patterning and shaping, and it's all unfolding, and there's nothing problematic about it. There's a beautiful rhythm to it, and that's all we need to see. There's no, very natural.
Yeah.
Not because we're doing anything to make it natural, because that is what it is, free of the concept. That's all we really need to see.
So we're doing a lot of things, but anyhow, we're not doing anything, right? In a way, it's just, I don't know, I hate to say it, it's just happening like that, or...
Well, life expresses, you know.
Yeah, life expresses,
lives.
And just, we can just be grateful that we get to be these channels. Yeah. I think we really went through a lot of things, you know, like we started basic and we talked about what's here right now, and then we talked about a few misunderstandings that we're not really trying to make it look a certain way.
Yeah, it was good.
And then we kind of finished with saying, like, this works. So all you other people that you know, are kind of hesitant can feel confident that this doesn't make you crazy or anything, you know. It just actually makes you functional. So, thanks so much, John.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Richard, yeah.
John Wheeler. What a luck, huh? Here in Australia. I would have had to go to Santa Cruz, right? So thanks so much for following in Australia. You got to come because, I mean, everybody that's good is here. So, really, thank you, John.
Good.
Just love it.
Yeah.